Contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to Government Amendment 50. Minister to move formally. The question is that the amendment be made. As a matter of say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Consideration completed. Third reading.
Aye.
Now.
No, now.
Yeah, we'll take the third answer, which was now. I call the Minister to move third reading.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the bill be now read a third time. Mr. Speaker, the Public Order Bill reflects the Government's duty to put the safety and interests of the law-abiding majority first. We are on their side, Mr. Speaker, not the side of extremists who stick themselves to trains, glue themselves to roads, interfere with newspaper distribution, vandalise property, disrupt the fuel supply, disrupt indeed this chamber or block ambulances. The growing tendency of those with strong opinions to mix their expression with acts of violence cannot and will not be tolerated. Now, the most generous interpretation of the kind of characters who glue themselves to roads is that they are dangerously deluded. But in fact, many of them, Mr. Speaker, much worse, have the deranged notion that their ends justify any means whatsoever. In the eyes of the militant protesters, the everyday priorities of the hard-working, law-abiding, patriotic majority can always be disregarded in pursuit of their warped schemes. These extremists stop people from earning a living, gaining an education or caring for a loved one in need. Ordinary people, working, learning or caring, are never deemed by the extremists as important enough to stand in the way of their plots and plans. Now, no government should fail in its duty to protect its citizens from such abuse, and this government will always put the law-abiding majority first and foremost. In a democracy, we make policy.
Does the Home Secretary agree that the police should consider wider cumulative impacts protests have on a local community rather than a narrow, notional assessment in isolation as to whether a serious disruption threshold has been reached? In other words, can we get the police to start locking them up, please?
Well, my honourable friend makes a very, very important point, and I think some of the issues here are that fundamentally police and key partners should view the impacts of disruption cumulatively. The clock shouldn't be reset every day and in each location. They need to look at the tactics in the round, and we need the police to act proactively, decidedly, diligently, and therefore there are various factors they need to include in their assessment of serious disruption. They need to consider the overall length and the time and the impact on communities. They need to look at the disruption to a general area. They need to look at the police resources which have been drained by the action, and they need to look holistically and actively at how they take action.
Would my right honourable friend agree that given the strict limitation of police resources, they should perhaps deploy those resources on dealing with the guerrilla tactics that are putting the people of London at harm, and less time policing pronouns on Twitter?
Well, my honourable friend raises an issue that is close to my heart, which is we need our police officers, our brave men and women, the majority of whom are heroes, frankly, in terms of this nation's law enforcement and security, to be focusing on our priorities and the priorities of the law-abiding majority, common sense policing. And that means focusing on targeting and fighting the bad guys, fighting the criminals and stopping crime, not policing pronouns and not pandering to politically correct campaigns. I will make progress, I'm afraid. No government should fail in its duty to protect its citizens from such abuse, and this government will always put the law-abiding majority first. And in a democracy, we make policy through civilised debate and at the ballot box, not through mob rule and not by visiting chaos and misery on our fellow citizens. When I was the Attorney General, I'm afraid I haven't got much time, when I was the Attorney General, I went to court to establish that it's not a human right to commit criminal damage. The Court of Appeal agreed with me in the Colston statue case that serious and violent disorder crossed a line when it comes to freedom of expression. That's common sense to the law-abiding majority. Now, since the 1st of October alone, The Metropolitan Police has made over 450 arrests linked to Just Stop Oil, and I welcome this, but more must be done. And that's why I welcome the fact that today, Transport for London have succeeded in securing an injunction to protect key parts of the London roads network. That's an important step forward in the fight against extremists. But these resources are vital and precious, and they have drained approximately 2,000 officer days at the Met already. That's resources that aren't focusing on knife crime, aren't dealing with violence against women and girls. But I'm afraid to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I will come to a close soon, that's why it was a central purpose of the Police Crime Sentencing Courts Bill, now Act, to properly empower the police in face of the protest, and yet members opposite voted against it. Had opposition members of the other place not blocked these measures when they were in the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill, the police would have had many of the powers contained in this bill, and the British people would not have been put through this grief today. So yes, I'm afraid, Madam Deputy Speaker, it's the Labour Party, it's the Lib Dems, it's the Coalition of Chaos, it's the Guardian reading, tofu-eating, wokerati, dare I say, the anti-growth coalition that we have to thank for the disruption that we are seeing on our roads today. Madam Deputy Speaker, I urge opposition MPs and members of the other place to take this second chance, do the right thing, respect the rights of the law-abiding majority and support this bill.
The question is that the bill be now read the third time. There's very little time left. Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's like astonishing. The Home Secretary actually talked about a coalition of chaos. We can see it in front of us as we speak. Look, I understand the Minister, they do have concerns. The government does have concerns. When they face issues where you've got a selfish minority wreaking havoc, you've got someone who's resisting all attempts by the powers that be to remove them, causing serious disruption, disorder, chaos, with serious consequences for the public, for businesses, for politics and for financial markets. But they've glued themselves under the desk. With honourable members opposite, we wish them luck with their attempts to extricate another failing Tory Prime Minister from number 10, but I suggest it isn't a reason to change the law for everyone else. This is the second public order bill in the space of 6 months. The government could have got through a victims bill by now. They chose not to. They could have put more time into action on violence against women and girls. They chose not to. Instead, they're repeating the same debates we've had already. The Home Secretary referred to acts of violence and blocking roads. They are rightly already crimes. They are rightly already offences. In fact, this Conservative government has put fewer thugs and criminals behind bars because prosecutions for violent crime have plummeted on their watch. Antisocial behaviour action in many areas has totally collapsed. We have seen, Madam Deputy Speaker, certain protests recently that have angered all of us. Defacing works of art is a total disgrace. Blocking roads so that you prevent ambulances getting through is appalling. Both of those are rightly against the law already, and we've seen people rightly arrested and charged for criminal damage and for blocking highways. We support the action of Transport for London to take out injunctions. That is why we have argued from the start about making it smoother for organisations to take injunction action. But we've also seen today members from all sides of this House stand up for the principles of peaceful protest in the face of the truly appalling images we've seen from outside the Chinese consulate in Manchester, including a serious assault which put one protester into hospital. Parliament has to stand up for the peaceful rights. As the Foreign Office Minister rightly said earlier today, peaceful protest is a fundamental part of British society, and in our country everyone has the right to express their views peacefully. That is why we have to make sure that when we legislate in these areas, we do so with care, because in a democracy people need the freedom to speak out against authority and make their views heard, and we should have protection and safeguards against serious disruption to essential services. That's why we put forward measures. That's why we've supported buffer zones around abortion clinics. It's why we put forward measures in the previous bills around vaccine clinics and making sure that people could not be targeted by harassment and intimidation. And my honourable friends have talked about the existing legislation that is already in place. The measures in this bill will not tackle that, but what instead they do is mean that a police inspector will have the power to stop and search anyone in the vicinity of a protest, regardless of whether they suspect them of being involved in committing a criminal offence. It could mean people being stopped and searched in Parliament Square, frankly, pretty much any day of the week when there are protests taking place. The Home Secretary herself says she sees herself as a champion of freedom of speech and freedom of expression. She said, freedom of speech must be protected. Turns out not if it's too noisy. Speaking is fine. Speaking too loudly could be a criminal offence. She says being offended goes hand in hand with free speech, but she's made it an offence to be seriously annoying. Defend offence, but not annoyance. It's totally illogical.
Order. Under the order of the House today, I must now put the question on third reading. The question is that the bill be now read the third time. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No.